If you're dating online, nothing triggered alarm bells or felt like a scam. From the outside, it looked like a normal connection. logic is accepted, it's very easy for future emotions to be handled the same way. Finally, there's this line: knowing you won't be taken by another man. This is where the meaning changes entirely. It introduces the idea of ownership rather than partnership. Not choosing each other, not mutual commitment, but the fear of being taken, as if you are something to be claimed or protected from others, rather than a person with agency. There's one more detail that's easy to miss, but impossible to ignore once you see it. He asked me to remove my dating profile. He did not remove his. And when I asked about that imbalance, the response I received told me everything I needed to know about what this request was really about. Act 4. Isolation, without using the word. At this stage, nothing overtly bad has happened yet. There are no obvious warning signs, no moments that feel dramatic enough to name as a problem. But something critical has already begun. Because once you remove your dating profile, you're no longer comparing experiences. You're no longer seeing how others communicate, how effort can look different, or how boundaries are normally respected. Without realizing it, your point of reference starts to narrow. When that comparison disappears, it becomes harder to notice imbalance. You stop questioning gaps in effort or inconsistencies in behavior because there's nothing else to measure them against. This one person slowly becomes your emotional reference point, the standard by which everything else is evaluated. And when that happens, imbalance doesn't register as imbalance anymore. It doesn't feel like something is wrong. It feels like waiting. It feels like understanding. It feels like patience. Act 5. What changed after I agreed? After I removed my dating profile, I expected more closeness, more security, more consistency. That's the promise implied by the request, that by giving something up, the connection will deepen. But instead, the opposite happened. Replies became slower. Availability became unpredictable. Plans stopped feeling solid and became vague, tentative, easy to postpone. What changed wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. The reassurance didn't increase. The effort decreased. And this is where people often get confused, because we're taught that commitment should bring stability. When it doesn't, we start looking inward for the explanation instead of questioning the dynamic itself. Act 6. The first time I questioned it. Eventually, I said something. Not aggressively, not accusingly, just honestly. I expressed uncertainty in the simplest way possible, assuming that clarity would lead to reassurance. But the response I received didn't address the concern itself. Instead, it redirected it. What happened next is subtle but important. Rather than engaging with the behavior I was questioning, he reframed the issue. Suddenly, the problem wasn't what he was doing. It was my trust, my insecurity, my expectations. The focus shifted away from his actions and onto my reaction. This is a critical moment in these dynamics because it's where reality starts to blur. The conversation stops being about resolving an issue and starts becoming about managing discomfort. And this is often the point where people begin apologizing, not for wrongdoing, but for having boundaries at all. Act 7. Why this is so effective psychologically. This tactic works because it creates exclusive emotional access without requiring exclusive responsibility. One person gains priority in your emotional world, while remaining free from the obligations that normally come with that position. There is an illusion of commitment, but no structure supporting it. Real exclusivity comes with presence, consistency, and accountability. It shows up in actions that match words, in reliability that doesn't need to be negotiated, in effort that doesn't disappear once something is given. What happened here was the opposite. The connection came with absence instead of presence, with unpredictability instead of consistency. This stage is especially effective for scammers and emotionally manipulative people because it costs them nothing. They don't have to change their behavior, increase their effort, or limit their own options. All they need is your agreement. And once that happens, they gain access while you lose options. Act 8. The pattern reveal. After this experience, I started looking deeper. I began paying attention to other stories, other conversations, other screenshots shared by people who thought they were alone in what they experienced. And that's when I saw the same sentence appear again and again. Different people, different wording, different contexts, but the same structure underneath. The pattern was unmistakable. First comes isolation, introduced gently and framed as care. Then comes control, justified through feelings and insecurity. And later, once options are gone and reference points are removed, exploitation becomes possible. Not always financial at first, but emotional, psychological, and incremental. What felt personal was never unique. It was a repeatable design. Act 9. Why smart people stay. People like to believe that scams and manipulative dynamics only work on the naive or the careless. That belief is comforting, but it isn't true. These situations don't rely on ignorance, they rely on empathy. They work on people who care, who reflect, who try to understand the emotions and intentions of others before judging them. Emotional investment creates momentum. Once time, attention, and hope have been poured into something, walking away feels like loss rather than protection. That momentum becomes difficult to interrupt, especially when it's fueled by the belief that clarity or closeness is just one more conversation away. And when hope is involved, logic often arrives too late. Act 10. The moment of clarity. The moment of clarity didn't arrive with confrontation or drama. It came quietly, through alignment, or more accurately, through the absence of it. What he asked for and what he offered no longer matched. He wanted exclusivity, but avoided meeting. He wanted reassurance, but avoided accountability. He wanted control without putting in effort. Once that mismatch became visible, everything else fell into place. This wasn't confusion or mixed signals. It wasn't miscommunication or fear of vulnerability. It was strategy. Act 11. How to respond if this happens to you. If someone asks you to remove your dating profile, pause. Not because the request is always wrong, but because healthy interest moves closer, not smaller. It expands into shared experiences, real-world presence, and mutual effort, rather than narrowing your options prematurely. Ask for mutual action. Ask for alignment that exists outside of words and messages. If exclusivity is being requested, it should come with consistency, accountability, and visible commitment from both sides. And most importantly, pay attention to behavior, not reassurance. Reassurance is easy to offer. Behavior is much harder to fake. Act 12. Final Reframe and CTA. Scammers don't isolate you from your friends first. They isolate you from your options. Quietly, patiently, emotionally. It happens without confrontation and without urgency, so it rarely feels like isolation while it's happening. If this felt familiar, understand this. You're not weak. You're human. These dynamics don't work because people are careless. They work because people are capable of trust, empathy, and hope. And if someone you care about is dating online, send them this. That single sentence has trapped a lot of people, long before money was ever mentioned. If this felt familiar, please know this. You're not weak. You're human. And if you want to see the exact phrases that signal this pattern early, there's a free booklet linked below in the comment section that breaks them down, line by line, so you can recognize them before you give anything up. If this reminded you of someone you care about, send them this video. One sentence. Can you delete your profile? Has trapped a lot of people long before money was ever mentioned. And if you want to protect yourself going forward, click the link below in the comment section to download the free booklet. Awareness doesn't make you cynical. It keeps your options and your agency intact.